And I think now that that has impacted somewhat on our tourism, because once these things are on the international news, then people can get the wrong information. And I think what was being discussed at the time was that we're going to have some GPS tracking systems put on board the jet skis and so on, because this is all part of the visitor attraction for their safety and recovery processes. One of the other things that we should look at in terms of the infrastructure, Mr. President, is the installation of a lot more cameras, because once I was told again when I was in London, between leaving home and getting to work, I would have been clocked 300 times on cameras. So I think that we need, in terms of the whole visitor experience, because you can see when somebody goes missing in the international countries, in Turkey and wherever, you can always get CCTV pictures of exactly where they were on the beach. And most of the legislation, like I said, that come here to this parliament is obviously trying to bring Barbados in line with what's happening internationally. And this whole idea of the installation of cameras would be very, very effective in terms of even the movements of people along the way. Another thing that visitors looked at, and Senator Grant touched on it a little bit, is the whole question of smart technology. You go on your phone and you book an Uber, you book a taxi, and you get the taxi, it will tell you where the nearest taxi is that you can go and take that taxi. So all these things that we have to look at building out in terms of visitor experience is not only the food and the actual attractions, but it's the other things surrounding it. One of the other things too, believe it or not, is in the area of the said zebra crossings. I know that there are zebra crossings with lights on them, but again, if you're bringing Barbados into the international arena, you have to have the zebra crossings that are controlled by traffic lights. The ones, I think we have one by Shafet, the one that's by Shafet Rockley, that crossing there is controlled by traffic lights. And a lot of times at night, when all those visitors and Barbadians alike are in Oistins, the number of near misses along that road. Yes, there are the zebra crossings, they can be painted, but Barbadian drivers are not accustomed when approaching a zebra crossing and people are there, you have to stop. So visitors coming to Barbados know that internationally, as soon as you get by a zebra crossing, the traffic automatically stops. So given that it is not our cultural experiences to do that, Mr. President, I am saying to the tourism players here, install traffic lights by critical zebra crossing areas. The other thing, and the last thing that I'll speak to, is the whole question of the expansion of the Grantley Adams International Airport. We should, in the terms of building out, I've not seen the plans, so I don't know. We should have the multi-storied car parks, because parking at Grantley Adams at peak times is very, very, very critical. So I hope with the building out, we will have those multi-story car parks. And previously, I had spoken to the whole question of jet bridges as part of that expansion program. And even though, Mr. President, through you to my senator here, even when we have the jet bridges, I think we should still have the option of letting the passengers disembark in the sunshine. But the jet bridges will be primarily when it is raining, so that they would get that whole experience. So the airport, hopefully with the renovations and that whole build out, would bring that airport into a real world-class standard, where you're going to have the concessions inbound and outbound. Because right now there's a paucity of concessions inbound. There's nothing to do really when you come in. One of the other things that I would like to see at our airport would be the whole display of previous prime ministers, current prime ministers in big bold. When people come into the country, previous governors general, cricket legends, that people know that they're in Barbados. This is part of the Barbados experience. So as soon as you land at any of our port of entry, any of our ports, you see and you get the experiences of what Barbados is like, and you see a history of Barbados pictorially there in front of you. So those are the few things, Mr. President, that I would like to say. And with those few words, sir, I'm obliged to you.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, Mr. President, for affording me this opportunity to speak to this resolution. I'll be very brief with regard to the resolution before us, just to point out some things that I believe are necessary for going forward. I believe the first thing we need to come to grips with, having looked at the principal challenges confronting the cruise tourism in Barbados, particularly the first three: an aging and aesthetically limited port infrastructure, an uncompetitive and unappealing shopping environment, and a limited number of tourism attractions and the absence of new products. I mean, these are telling. And I think one of the things we must recognize about the nature of the cruise industry is that cruises come as a package. Not everyone who comes to Barbados really has Barbados as their primary destination to come to. It's just a part of a package. And so the obligation is laid upon us to ensure that we are so appealing when they get here that they want to disembark, to come and see what is going on here. And these three challenges that I mentioned do not lend to that. In fact, for those of us who have even done some traveling within the cruises that leave from Barbados, you will recognize that our port, because of its dual function of a cargo and cruise port, is not very appealing when you look at some of the others in the region. And when a person goes on a cruise, I believe that it is the time when we should be thinking that there ought to be a seamless transition from when one steps off the cruise ship onto land, that same environment must be there. Persons must be interacting with the people from this country. And when we look at the environs of our port, where it is, I believe we can all be honest and say it's a very desolate place once you come through that gate. There's not much happening down there. There's nothing naturally occurring around our cruise port. And it is not very appealing to the passenger who is coming in. In addition to that, even coming into Bridgetown, a lot of the activity that once existed in Bridgetown has been decentralized. We now have, there are some days you come into Bridgetown and it can appear as a ghost town. And so perhaps that is why, as mentioned in this document, the Sugar Point project has seemingly been shelved. And we're now looking at berthing somewhere in the West Coast, on the West Coast for some ships. And I support that idea in that it offers diversity, and I think that the West Coast as it stands is even more appealing in terms of our tourism product than coming into the port at Bridgetown. I would like to add to that, if we are going to go that way, to keep the option of Bridgetown open, that we also look at the concept of water taxis to move persons from that area to Bridgetown. Because for those of us who have traveled, I'm sure you would know, if I'm going to a country for one day, I do not want to be stuck in traffic. I do not want my time to be taken up traveling on the road, just sitting in a car, sitting in the taxi somewhere. And I believe the concept of water taxis can offer a new avenue, even a new attraction, just to enjoy the beauty of the West Coast as you come up. Even we can have stops leading right up to Oistins. And this is a new attraction that I believe would add to our tourism product. In addition to this, I need to put in a plug here for heritage tourism. I think we mention it, but we do not seem to be very serious about it. Barbados, because of its history, has some of the most beautiful buildings in the region, simply because the English settled here not simply as a colony, but as home. And so the concept of Little England is not something we should be ashamed of. But in order to capitalize in this area of heritage, we have to take seriously our architectural infrastructure. We have to take seriously the buildings that we have and recognize that these buildings have value, and we need to be serious about putting some money into them to bring them up to scratch. The subvention that is given to the National Trust, that has been given to the National Trust in our last two budgets of just under $1 million, is hardly anything when considering the upgrade of old buildings and architecture. So I wish for us to seriously look at that aspect and that avenue in our national development, where heritage tourism can become an integral part of the product being offered. Of course, there's also ecotourism, and I still think that there are areas in the Scotland district where entrepreneurs can be encouraged to explore new trails. This is something that a lot of tourists are attracted to at this point in time. Strange enough, I was just a few days ago looking on TripAdvisor. This is not an ad. Looking on TripAdvisor. And I just happened to come across the church that I grew up in St. Kitts, St. Mary's Church, which is a little quaint building in the countryside, Keon, St. Mary's. But I was the most shocked person to see that St. Mary's Church, there are lots of pictures of it on TripAdvisor, because there is a tour that goes around the country, into the country area, and St. Mary's Church is now dubbed as the church where the song Amazing Grace was penned. Well, I don't know about that one. But it is a beautiful building, and persons are attracted to the architecture. And I believe that we have so many of those offerings here, not only in our church buildings, but in lots of the other buildings that we have. And this is something that we can focus on and pay attention to. But also new trails in the Scotland district where persons can go through the rainforest and have an experience of what our natural beauty offers. And so if we're going to be serious about cruise tourism, I believe that we need to upgrade, at least for the start, our port where persons are coming in, because it can be a very dampening experience to be looking forward to coming to this place, and then as soon as you're near it, all you see are containers. And, you know, when you go to other places and you see this, for example, and not to mention St. Kitts again, but Port Zante and St. Kitts, you get off and straight away you're into your shopping areas, you're interacting with the people, and I think that is what people are looking for when we're talking about cruise tourism. So I implore us all. I wish to commend the Commission for the comprehensive report, and I look forward to some action being taken in the area of cruise tourism, because it is too important an income stream for us not to take seriously. So I encourage us to continue the good work of the Commission, but also let us have some implementation so that we can salvage our cruise industry and also build it up from here on. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. I entirely agree with Senator Rogers and his comments on heritage tourism. We only recently passed a new town planning act, and already we are seeing buildings that should have been listed being knocked down as we speak. And Mr. President, there is no point passing acts unless you will take action to stop the destruction. Now, we think about tourism as fun and health, but inevitably people get sick when they travel. And as one ages, the possibility that you will get sick while you're traveling becomes a reality. I guess when you're younger, you're more likely to suffer trauma from having fun, and as you're older, the ravages of time takes over. Mr. President, we have to spend significant time looking at our healthcare product. Persons who come to this country, and I will not attach an age to what age we'll start thinking about it, would like to think that when they come to Barbados and they fall ill, they can be treated in the best available facilities. And sometimes one arrives with an existing illness, and you need to have what is really elective care, like hemodialysis. And we can't think about building out a tourism product unless we look at whether we have the appropriate facilities to accommodate the additional persons other than our locals who need services like that. So when we plan our expansion, we have to seriously look at whether we will also provide incentives to help local clinics build out or invite others in to meet the demand. The emergency services are somewhat different, and they are lacking in some ways. I think it was a few months ago when the Ministry of Health appeared in the Well of Parliament and spoke about ring fencing healthcare, but we have deficiencies. And as you age, you're more prone to getting heart attacks, and we know that our systems are not up to scratch. And Mr. President, we need to urgently, well in advance, sit down and really think about regulation. We might have various facilities in existence that provide some level of care, but unless they're regulated, we are going to find ourselves in trouble. Someone mentioned a particular advertising agency, and just as well as people advertise, there's a column on the right that says rating. So you might get a bad rating because your granny came here and broke her hip and somebody missed it. So we have to now, not only for visitors, but for locals, even more importantly, think about regulation. What are the minimum requirements to have a facility? Should there be inspections? And if there are rules that state there is supposed to be inspections, are they being done? It will keep us out of the headlines, Mr. President, and it will stop us getting into trouble. Thank you, sir.
Mr. President, thank you. And I am certainly very heartened by the contributions that have been made by my fellow senators on this resolution regarding the National Cruise Development Commission's report. Now, it certainly speaks, this report, to the need for Barbados to become more visitor-friendly. And we have heard a number of our other colleagues here speak to that matter, and I completely agree with everything that has been said. There's a white paper on sustainable development of tourism in Barbados, and it highlights that information technology is pivotal to achieving sustainable tourism. And this Barbados Labour Party government of Barbados also is committed, and if I can quote from the manifesto, sir, with your permission, Mr. President, the provision of universal access to a minimum threshold of high-speed broadband internet as a means of powering the new national digital economy, smart cities and smart Barbados. And I started with that, Mr. President, because in another capacity, I have responsibility for the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology. And I heard Senator Rogers speak about implementation. And I just hope that he will be heartened, as will others, that the implementation process has already started, certainly in terms of building a smart bridge town. Because we have to Barbados has indeed started that process, and we have determined that we cannot do everything all at once. And therefore, we will have to build out the Smart Barbados in phases, and we wanted to start with our capital city. In this initial phase, there will be 3 basic aspects of our Smart Bridge Town. And this is just the first phase. There will be others, and I'll tell you about those later. First is free Wi-Fi for internet access in Bridgetown. Second is smart parking on streets adjoining Broad Street. And the third is a mobile app that will facilitate tourism engagement. And I heard many people speak about the need for us to engage tourists in a more meaningful way, particularly those coming out of the port. So, Mr. President, with your permission, I will simply go over these 3, as I know this is a resolution. The debate does not necessarily have to be long, and so I shall be short, sir. With regards to free Wi-Fi, I think we know that free Wi-Fi, to provide free Wi-Fi for an entire city is expensive, even to provide it for our house sometimes. Well, not free, but provide that service for our homes and our businesses can be costly, and certainly to do it for a full city will be expensive. However, Barbados is committed. And so we have determined that we will design and build in adequate capacity to ensure that there's a good user experience, because as you know, if there isn't enough capacity, what happens is when you log on, it either takes too long or you fall off. And so we are taking the time to design and build a network where we believe it is working for the capacity that we expect to have here in Bridgetown, at least in the initial stages. Persons through that Wi-Fi will have access to basic services. They'll be able to browse, watch videos, access their emails, be on social media, and perform many of the other things that people expect to be able to do with free Wi-Fi. With regards to the smart parking, this is, of course, as I said, the second component of the first phase of the Smart Bridge Town. There will be sensors and geotagging of parking spots in town. And I'm going to get out of the technology, and I'll just tell you pretty straight what you'll be able to do. You will be able to detect where the free parking spots are in Bridgetown, go there and pay for it all online. We have already started working with the Royal Barbados Police Force, with Lands and Surveys Department, and together we have identified those streets in Bridgetown where the first pilot of the smart parking will begin. And it's a whole of government approach. We have met with the businesses in Bridgetown and a number of other stakeholders, and we have mapped out the areas which will be the first area for coverage. And it is important that we not only speak to Bridgetown proper and speak to the businesses, but homes, families that are in the Bridgetown area must also be able to benefit in this initial stage, because people have to matter in this entire movement towards a smart Barbados. I said I will be short, sir, so I will move on to the tourism mobile app. Again, this is all of Barbados working together, and so the Barbados Tourism Product Authority has already started its work on a mobile app that, using the free Wi-Fi and an interactive mobile app, will be able to add value to the experience of the tourists who are connecting into the system. Our ministry is also working with businesses and groups to create what is called hotspots. And these hotspots are areas where you will have very high-speed access. There'll be green spaces, and we can create social interaction in those areas as well. And so there'll be hotspots around Bridgetown in collaboration with tourists. And those hotspots will not just be for the tourists, they'll be for Barbadians as well. So I think we all know that there are several benefits to us having a smart city. We will, as we go forward in the future, I said we will start with those three being the free Wi-Fi, the smart parking, and of course the Tourism Act to enhanced tourist engagement. But in the future, we will also have the smart city being connected to our sewer system, our infrastructure, our lighting, and we'll be able to do some environmental monitoring. And on a platform that is integrated, we'll be able to responsibly share information and research that will help us to plan, so that we know, for example, somebody mentioned having increased cameras in certain areas, so you know how you can deal with security in particular areas, so that we know there are certain streets at certain times. What do we do with lighting in those areas? Are we able to keep those lights at full blast, or do we have them at a level which is still safe, but it reduces the impact on the environment in terms of our usage of power, etc. And so the process has started. Where are we now? We determined, in fact, the Cabinet of Barbados gave our ministry the authority to go forward through a public tender process. Tenders have been received, tenders have been closed, tenders have been evaluated, and now they are before the procurement team here in Barbados to make sure that there's total transparency and fairness in the way that the tender is then issued. And so within the next few months, Barbados will begin to see us move in the direction of a smart Bridgetown. And so, as I close this debate on the final report of the National Cruise Development Commission, I do so with pleasure, allowing this chamber and Barbados through you, Mr. President, to know that smart Bridgetown is on its way. And with these few words, I beg to move that this resolution now pass.
The question is that the resolution currently under consideration, that the Senate take note of the final report of the National Cruise Development Commission, do now pass. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the resolution has been passed. You want to move the adjournment?
Mr. President.
Before the adjournment of the Senate be moved, I just wish to report to all honourable members that Senator Althea Wiggins has been appointed as the Prime Minister's Special Envoy to Suriname. Her duties will involve moving between Barbados and Suriname. And to that extent, she will not be resigning from the Senate to carry out her duties as Special Envoy. I just want to take this opportunity, and I'm sure that I speak on behalf of all fellow senators, in wishing her well in this new and important assignment. And I'm glad that she will not we can now have the motion that the Senate be adjourned until next Wednesday.
Mr. President, in moving for adjournment, I just wish to add my voice of congratulations on the appointment of Senator Wiggins as Prime Minister's Special Envoy to Suriname. We know that you will do Barbados proud, and we look forward to seeing you here in the Senate, as you will not necessarily, I am told, and I am not sure of that, but I am told that you will not be gone permanently, and therefore we look forward to seeing you here from time to time. And Mr. President, on that note, I beg to move that the Senate now adjourn until next Wednesday, July 24th.
The question is that the Senate be now adjourned until next Wednesday, July 24th. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. And we are now adjourned until next week, Wednesday, July 24th.